Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're listening to the Locked On Broncos Podcast, hosted by Cody Rourke, your daily Broncos podcast.
Are Broncos fans going to be allowed to attend games at full capacity in 2021? The city of Denver gave us an update yesterday on the status of that situation. Plus, Dre'Mont Jones doesn't give a about the Broncos quarterback position, and Tim Patrick reflects on his journey from undrafted wide receiver to a mainstay contributor for the Denver Broncos. We talk about it. We break it down all in today's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked On NFL Network, your team every day from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Rourke, director of video content at Pro Football Network and Broncos analyst for the Locked On NFL Network. You catch me here 5 days a week, the Locked On Broncos podcast. Follow me on Twitter at Cody Rourke NFL. Follow the show at Locked On Broncos. Like us on all social media pages. And don't forget to hit that subscribe or follow button on your favorite audio podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or the Odyssey app. Not to mention, hit that subscribe button here on the YouTube channel. Daily video Broncos content brought to you by yours truly. But ladies and gentlemen, a lot to talk about here on today's episode of the show, all across Broncos country on this beautiful Thursday. The Broncos, they will have 100% capacity attendance by fans in 2021. Last week, there was a little bit of a hang-up as the Indianapolis Colts and the Denver Broncos were two teams that weren't yet confirmed by their own individual cities as to whether or not they would have 100% capacity. It was announced yesterday that the Broncos will, in fact, have 76,000 screaming fans at Empower Field at Mile High. This is a big step in the right direction of returning back to normalcy for everybody when sports, when you factor in last year, really family and friends were able to attend games at Empower Field at Mile High, and it was a little bit of a different vibe. Now, 500 people in the stands is not going to really create an element where it's going to motivate the Broncos on the field. Now, the thing I do want to talk about the power of being at the Broncos Stadium is the fact that when it's third down and there's 76,000 roaring fans in the stadium and they are chanting defense, or they're chanting incomplete, or they're celebrating that the offense scores a touchdown, the stadium shakes. The cameras on the television, they shake. The press box, it shakes. There is a different atmosphere in Broncos country, and it's really due to the passionate fans that watch this show, that listen to the show, that go to the games. And I wanted to reach out to some Broncos fans and figure out what they feel about this whole situation. Obviously, not being able to attend last year, I reached out to some season ticket holders, and Bree 0322 in a constant interaction with me on Twitter. Really appreciate Bree. She's rocking one of these "Don't Be a Filthy Casual" t-shirts, by the way, link in the description below. But she said that she's very nervous, but she's ready to have that game day feeling once again. It made her realize how much that she took it for granted. That electric feeling is like no other, and she says that she missed it so much. She's also excited to see everybody for tailgates, and Broncos country can throw some really good tailgate festivities in terms of being able to just celebrate fandom. So that's something, obviously, when I attend games, I'm going to be looking forward to interacting with fans once again as media, interviewing fans about their tailgate series. We're going to launch a bunch of stuff there. So Broncos country, how are you feeling that you now get to sit your tail end in the stadium, whether it's in the nosebleeds, the south stands, or in the end zone? You are Locked On Broncos, folks, but you're very excited for Broncos fans to be able to be back at the stadium as well. The atmosphere, like I said, nothing beats it. And not to mention in the mid-afternoon games when the sunset's coming up, it gets a little bit colder. Once you start reaching that 4:30, 4:45 p.m. time, about 2.5 hours into the game, the atmosphere, the sky in Denver is so beautiful when it's sunny, when it's clear. And it just makes the environment, the experience that much more meaningful, I think, for Broncos country. So Broncos country, share with me in the YouTube comment section down below or on Twitter at Cody Rourke NFL, at Locked On Broncos, how you feel about being able to be in the stands once again, full capacity, rocking and roaring, cheering on the team that you root for on Sundays, the Denver Broncos. But with that said, let's continue on with our discussion on today's episode of the show. Pro Football Network, they listed their most underrated players for all 32 teams across the National Football League, and the Denver Broncos selection is interesting, and that's Courtland Sutton. Now, James Vergro's over there at Pro Football Network. He listed here, I'm going to read off what he said. He said that Jerry Jeudy is the best receiver on the Broncos. Talk needs to stop. Courtland Sutton is one of the best wide receivers in the AFC, and it seems many forgot about him due to an ACL injury last season. So let me remind you, as a rookie out of SMU in 2018, Sutton hauled in 42 catches for 704 yards and 4 touchdowns. Who was Denver's signal caller at that time? It was Case Keenum. He's a solid backup in his own right, but he's not a quality starter at the quarterback position. Who were Sutton's quarterbacks in 2019? He said a mix of Joe Flacco, Drew Lock, and a pinch of Brandon Allen. Despite that underwhelming group throwing him the football, Sutton corralled 72 catches for 1,100 yards and 6 touchdowns. And then he says here, if, and this is a big if, Drew Lock proves to be much more accurate as a quarterback, Sutton could put himself on the national map in 2021. And we know, too, coming off of an ACL surgery, that's huge for Courtland Sutton at this point in time where he's at. Now, I tell you what, the Broncos social media team, they've been capturing everything at OTAs. He's running routes. He's doing 7-on-7. He looks damn good. Yes, he's got the Don Joy knee brace on. That is a security blanket. And honestly, it provides more stability to the knee, especially when you plant your foot in the ground. And so there's an added layer of protection, I think, for Courtland there. Don Joy, they make them customized for performance when you're actually on the field. Now, we see quarterbacks wear knee braces all the time. Sometimes they wear on their non-dominant foot. That way, if they're a right-handed quarterback, they're going to have one on their left hand because usually that's the foot when they go to throw the ball that comes up and is kind of loose, and sometimes those players get hit in the knee there. But in terms of wide receiver, Courtland Sutton, it's going to be big for him coming back off of an ACL. He's got a lot to prove. And look, this is a big year for the Broncos quarterback position, regardless if it's Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock, or a unicorn that wears number 12. We'll obviously break down all the details this upcoming season in training camp. We got the preseason, and we have coverage of the regular season, hopefully the playoffs too for Broncos country. But Locked On Broncos has you covered all year long here on the Locked On NFL Network. But Broncos country, coming up here in just a moment, we're going to hear from Dre'Mont Jones and Tim Patrick. Now, first off, Dre'Mont Jones, like I said, he don't give a damn about who's good the quarterback will be for the Broncos this upcoming season. He's not focused on that. He's focused on his job on the defensive side of the ball. But before we get into that conversation, before we hear from them, I got to tell you about the two sponsors of today's episode of the show. That's our good friends over there, Credit Karma Money and RockAuto.com. Now, with Credit Karma Money, Credit Karma has always been there to help you make better financial decisions, and now they want to help you even more with a Credit Karma Money spend account. You can be rewarded for good money habits. Who doesn't want instant gratification? If you're looking for satisfaction, there's no need to wait. With Credit Karma Money, you could win cash reimbursements for debit card purchases. And Credit Karma Money is a brand new checking account where you can win cash reimbursements just for making purchases. And when you use your Credit Karma Money debit card, you can win daily instant karma purchase reimbursements on items up to $5,000. That's a lot of money. Just pay with your debit card, and if you win, you'll be notified on the spot, and your instant karma cash will be added back to your spend account. Credit Karma Money has already given away over $3 million in instant karma to over 50,000 Credit Karma members and counting. Open your FDIC insured spend account for free. There's no minimum balance requirements, no overdraft fees, and free withdrawals from a network of over 50,000 ATMs. Credit Karma Money, progress starts here. Right now, visit creditkarmamoney.com/winmoney to open your free account and start winning instant karma today. Once again, go to creditkarma.com/winmoney to sign up for free and start winning instant karma. That's creditkarma.com/winmoney. Instant karma is sponsored by Credit Karma. No purchase necessary. Exclusions and terms apply. See rules. Banking services provided by MVB Bank Incorporated. Member FDIC. Maximum balance and transfer limits apply. And our good friends over there at rockauto.com, a family-owned business that's been serving auto parts customers online for over 20 years. You can go to rockauto.com right now to shop for auto and body parts from hundreds of manufacturers, and they have everything from engine control modules, brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. And whether it's for your classic or your daily driver, you get everything that you need delivered directly to your doorstep in just a few easy clicks. And the rockauto.com catalog is unique and remarkably easy to navigate. You can quickly see all the parts available for your vehicle based on year, make, model, brands, specifications, and even the prices that you prefer. That's why I rock with rockauto.com. Not to mention prices at rockauto.com are the same for everybody and are always reliably low. Whether you're a professional or a do-it-yourselfer, you get everything that you need. rockauto.com. So why spend up to twice as much for the same parts elsewhere when you can go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck and write Locked On Broncos in there? How did you hear about us box? So that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts that your car will ever need. rockauto.com. And y'all act like y'all forgot about Dre. Dre'Mont Jones met with the media yesterday after practice. He got a lift in, but really just some insight for Dre'Mont Jones, who I've pegged and I've talked about here on the podcast in depth about me believing he's going to be the next big impact player for the Broncos defense here in 2021. He's got a really good chance to really solidify himself. Now, last season, 6.5 sacks on the year in limited action. I mean, that was just in a rotational role. Just imagine if he gets a full-on slate to be able to be the impact player that he was as a rotational guy. You can maybe project a little bit. It's probably going to amplify a little bit. So if he's able to get 6.5 sacks in that rotation role, what might he be able to get in 2021, especially with a healthy Von Miller and Bradley Chubb. So we heard from Dre'Mont Jones yesterday, who met with the media, and really the talk of the offseason so far, when you look at the Broncos, their defensive additions this offseason, bringing back Von Miller, Shelby Harris, Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, adding Patrick Surtain, Ronald Darby, Kyle Fuller. There is a lot of optimism amongst talking circles and also in the media, and myself included, that the Broncos on paper, they actually may have one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, can they live up to that expectation?
Optimism is huge, given what's on paper. But the only thing I can go by right now is on paper. I haven't really got a chance to actually be a part of the defense that much and doing 11-on-11 stuff. We'll be doing on defense a lot of just 7-on and the D-lines during the individual drills. I can't really see everything.
Well, and that's obviously something to be very understood at this point. In 7-on-7, the defensive linemen know what they're doing. They're working with Coach Kalar away from everybody else. So now, next week when the Broncos, they get back on the practice field, as mandatory minicamp creeps up, the final part of OTAs, they will start adding in some 11-on-11 work. So for Dre'Mont Jones, he'll be able to see a little bit more up close and personal how that defense is really looking. You know, guys like Von Miller, the defensive line, the linebackers, defensive backs, he's going to have a more of an intricate nature to be able to say, okay, this guy's lining up over here, this guy's lining up here. We're doing this defensively, even though there's no contact. There's not going to be any contact for OTAs, especially in the 11-on-11 stuff. You don't want to do that against your own guys. But leading up to training camp, it's going to get more physical. And so we're going to see if Dre'Mont Jones will be that guy, because he's been waiting for this opportunity. Last year for him, it was expected he was going to be the starter. But then the Broncos, they traded for Jurrell Casey. They got tremendous value by getting rid of a 7th-round pick to get Jurrell Casey. Unfortunately for Casey, it didn't work. And then in week 2, Dre'Mont Jones got hurt. He had a knee injury against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He missed some weeks. He came back against Kansas City, against Patrick Mahomes. He got a sack, and he pressured him consistently. So Dre'Mont's going to be a big part of that. Now, reflecting on his 6.5 sack season last year, what's his mindset coming into this year, and kind of what's in his control?
Nothing really changed. It's more about getting into the rhythm. Football and basketball going hand in hand when you got to get in the rhythm and get a feel for the game. And the more I was able to play towards the end, the more I feel comfortable being out there and just trying different pass rush moves and being okay with it.
And earlier I was talking about the dynamic that fans provide when they're in the stands defensively. If you've ever played the sport, now I've never played at the National Football League level, but I played in front of crowds of thousands of people, and still the atmosphere is electric when it's third down and people are chanting defense, and the stands, you can hear them, you can hear the footsteps. That's huge. Now, for the Broncos, we talked about at the opening of the show, they will have fans back in the stadium this upcoming season, Empower Field at Mile High, at 100% capacity. That is including the preseason. That's including the regular season. 10 total home games for the Broncos, and each game is essentially already sold out as the Broncos continue their sellout streak coming into 2021, not to mention the rise in the salary cap anticipated for next year. Denver right now sitting at $28.9 million of cap space. That added bonus there of having that revenue from fans being in the stands, Denver might be sitting pretty this upcoming offseason. But for Dre'Mont Jones, what are his thoughts on having fans back in the stadium this upcoming season?
Yeah, we need that. That fan aspect is huge. I mean, last year was really weird, and when we got just a piece of that, we had like a small capacity in the first couple of games, I can't remember. And when we lost that, I think that brought my morale down a little bit, because you don't hear the fans screaming. Like, what they do for us is very important. We all can say, they all can agree with me and say, we appreciate what the Broncos country does for us.
And fans are such an important aspect to the game regardless. Last year, we had pumped in artificial fake crowd noise. That didn't really do anything. But Kansas City, they were able to have a lot of fans in the stands. It gave them an added bonus. Now, the Broncos, they missed that one thing about being at Empower Field at Mile High. We talk about the altitude. We talk about how loud it is, how much the stadium shakes. But more importantly, just the vibe. I mean, for having fans in the stadium, it is empowering to the players. Ironically enough, Empower Field at Mile High. But being able to feed off of that energy, it's contagious. It's what we call in Denver Mile High magic. So for Dre'Mont Jones, for many Broncos players, and we're going to hear from Tim Patrick as well, who's excited about fans being back in the stands. But Dre'Mont Jones, one of the things he was asked to, it's going to be the topic of our conversation here today as we reflect on his media session yesterday. He was asked about the ongoing quarterback competition between Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, something that will be determined throughout the preseason for the Denver Broncos before a starter is named in week 1. What are Dre'Mont Jones' thoughts on the Broncos starting quarterback or the ongoing quarterback competition at Broncos camp and OTAs?
I mean, I don't give a shit. Whoever's the quarterback is the quarterback. I wish the best for Teddy. I wish the best for Drew. I don't know what they're doing. I can't see anything. I haven't been over there. So is what it is on that part.
And he is right. He hasn't been able to see that. I mean, as we mentioned, 7-on-7, he's not working. He's not being able to see that. So he's probably seeing the social media highlights that we all get to see. But the thing for Dre'Mont Jones, and this is an interesting perspective because we've heard from various other Broncos players, and they've been asked consistently about what are your thoughts on Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater on quarterback competition. There's people trying to decipher if there's any favoritism by players towards one certain quarterback or the other. This was the real first in-depth kind of answer that we got from Dre'Mont Jones in terms of what he really thinks. And so for a defensive player, you don't spend too much time focusing on what the offense is doing. I mean, obviously, if you're on the field, you want the offense to do its job, and you want to be able to capitalize off of rewarding them. Like for the Broncos last year, they would get sacks, they'd force punts, they'd get some turnovers in key situations, and then the offense couldn't reward them. So they do take interest in that. But for the quarterback competition, most players, they don't care. They want the best player to win because whoever wins is going to be the best player for the Broncos organization at the end of the day. So some insight from Dre'Mont Jones, who we all expect to have a big season for the Denver Broncos in 2021. Now, my question to you, Broncos Country here on the YouTube channel, video podcast, and also on the audio podcast platform, respond to me at Cody Rourke NFL or in the comment section down below. But the question I have for you is, how big of an impact do you think Dre'Mont Jones will have this upcoming season? I mean, we talked about Shelby Harris being maybe one of the breakout players of the year. I know Broncos fans listed Dre'Mont Jones in one of our recent episodes of the show, but Dre'Mont is in a great position. I mean, he's 280 pounds of lean muscle and physical strength, and not to mention he's deceptively quick for his size. So for him this upcoming season, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be in a prime position to really impact the Broncos defense and the success that they may have overall as an entire unit. He's going to be one of those key players in my firm opinion. But Broncos Country coming up here in just a moment. We're going to hear from Broncos wide receiver Tim Patrick, his journey from undrafted wide receiver to now being a stable part of the Denver Broncos. He received a second-round tender, so he views himself now as a second-round pick, but there's still some motivation behind Tim Patrick's journey. He wants a long-term contract, and he wants to be able to prove it, but he's got to take care of business, and he understands the importance of that. But before we get to that, I got to tell you about the other sponsor of today's episode of the show. It's our good friends over there, betonline.ag, and BetOnline is the fastest and the easiest way to bet on all of your sports action. Get all the latest news, odds, and info for all your sporting needs, including MLB, NBA, NHL, and all of your UFC and MMA action as NHL playoffs are ongoing. And then you have the NBA playoffs ongoing right now. Everything is crazy right now in the world of sports and basketball and hockey. So before the next pitch or tip-off, head over to BetOnline on your laptop or your mobile device and check out all the great sporting news, sign-up bonuses, and contest information. You don't have to sit on the sidelines anymore, as this is your chance to get into the game as teams prep for their runs in the playoffs and deeper towards championship aspirations. So head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit when you use promo code LOCKEDON. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. And as we get to the fourth quarter action of today's episode, Locked On Broncos, just a reminder, if you're a Colorado sports fan, you listen to Locked On Broncos every day, you should be listening to Locked On Avalanche, hosted by Chris Maselli, and Locked On Nuggets, hosted by Adam Mares and Matt Moore, as both teams are in the playoffs right now, looking to advance. I know the Nuggets, they take on the Blazers tonight in Portland. How sweet would it be to see Dame go home in Portland, and then Jamal Murray can wave bye-bye to Zach Collins, not to mention the Colorado Avalanche continuing to dice it up on the ice against the Las Vegas Knights. Check out the Locked On Avs and the Locked On Nuggets podcast in addition to your daily listening experience of Locked On Broncos. But we heard from Broncos wide receiver Tim Patrick yesterday at the UCL Training Center. And for Tim Patrick, it was a sight I think that many Broncos fans were happy for, seeing him return this year. Now, he did get the second-round tender for the Denver Broncos. Ultimately, for Tim Patrick, he came into the NFL as an undrafted rookie free agent. He got cut by several teams. The Broncos had a chance to see him up close and personal against, when he was in San Francisco. And so they picked him up, and he became a really big stable Nate when the Broncos actually traveled to Santa Clara to have training camp practices with the 49ers, and Tim Patrick was having a day. He was mossing dudes at practice, and so he became one of those players that was going to work his way into the rotation. And one thing he mentioned too, he bought into the culture of what Zach Assani, wide receiver coach for the Broncos, wanted from him in terms of being a technician from a blocking standpoint. When you look at Tim Patrick and his effort as a blocker, you'll see why the Broncos reward him with throws, and not to mention he had 0 drops in 2020. So for Tim Patrick, obviously a lot is at stake this season. There is a chance that he can get extended long-term, potentially if he plays to the standard that he did last year. Now for him, there's some motivation that we're going to get to in a little bit, but with Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, Noah Fant, Albert Okwuegbunam, KJ Hamler, all these wide receivers, it was asked the other day whether or not touches will be taken away from any key player, but Tim Patrick had a pretty resounding answer for that as it pertains to the opportunities that will be presented to every player that catches passes from the quarterbacks.
Not really take away catches, because the defense has to play us honest. We're gonna have 4 guys on the field that can make a big play at any moment. So there's not one guy you could just shut down because all of us are capable of taking over. So I think it's going to help a lot of us. And if we're on the field longer, that means there's going to be more passes and more targets for everybody. So you can't compare with what last year was because it's going to be a completely different team.
How can opposing defenses play the Broncos honestly, though? With Courtland Sutton, often at times when we've seen him on film, he's often bracket covered. He's got a cornerback that's playing up, either cover 2, outside leverage, or inside leverage with a safety help over the top. But really, depending on where you put Tim Patrick, if you line him up next to Courtland Sutton inside the slot, which he can play inside, he's done that and he did it very well for the Broncos. You have these different dynamics, especially with Jerry Jeudy on the outside where he can create separation with his route running ability, not to mention Noah Fant. The Broncos, they just have all these weapons and personnel. If they can stay healthy, it's going to be really hard for defense corners to say, hey, we're going to stop them by doing this. You can't really focus on one key guy because another guy can hurt you. And the Broncos have that luxury this year. So that's obviously a nice addition there. But for Tim Patrick, he's excited that Broncos fans will be back in the stadium this upcoming year. What's it like for him? And how did he deal with it last year with no fans in the stand and the fake crowd noise?
Everything energy, they will keep us going because earlier in the season, last year when we didn't have no fans, or it was like 500. You're hyped up for the game, but it gets to a point where the game kind of dies down. And there were sometimes I was yawning on the sideline. Like it got to a point where I started to have to take pre-workout before games. So having the fans in there, I don't think I'm gonna need pre-workout anymore.
And as I said, energy is contagious at Empower Field, a mile high from Broncos fans, the echo of the crowd. I mean, I tell you what, it's just groundbreaking. If you've been to a Broncos game, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But just imagine if you were a player in front of 76,000 fans and that energy, the roar of the crowd. I mean, it provides you with so much adrenaline. It's something that can't quite be explained. And only few people get to experience what that's like in their lifetime. So Tim Patrick living the dream there. But, we had a lot of talk about Jerry Jeudy, who met with the media yesterday. And one of the conversations about Jerry Jeudy, too, over the week, Vic Fangio's noted that he sees a more mature Jerry Jeudy. Jerry even touched on it in yesterday's episode, Lockdown Broncos, here where we broke it down, what he had said. But for Tim Patrick, a guy who worked with him exclusively last year, being next to him all season long as Courtland Sutton was out with an ACL, what were his thoughts on Jerry Jeudy's maturation, or maybe how he's learning from his rookie season to go into his second year as a National Football League wide receiver for the Denver Broncos?
He handled them good. Like obviously, he could have handled it better at some points, but he's a rookie, man, and he puts a lot on his shoulders. He wants to be great really bad. So stuff happens, but going into year 2, like I've said it already, Jerry Jeudy is like really good, like really, really good. So I think it's just all mental at this point. Like he knows he could get open against anybody in this league. And now it's just at the point that he just has to put it on film and remind him who he is, and that's it.
And I like that message too. Whatever defender is covering you, you remind him who you are. I mean, that's a nice mentality. It's a dog mentality. Yeah, but yeah, you know what Tim Patrick was touching on too. There were some questions into Jerry Jeudy last year by fans and media members in terms of maybe some tweets that Jerry Jeudy had sent out after the Broncos lost. In terms of at least I got my conditioning. He's a young guy, highly emotional, who came from a program where he never lost a game really. And then you go to Denver, your rookie season, things just aren't going the way that you would hope for to start your NFL career. But Jerry Jeudy still found a way to rise above that. He rebounded from that drop game in week 16, and then he had a big game week 17. So now the sky's the limit for Jerry Jeudy in 2021. And obviously he's very excited to have Tim Patrick alongside him. Those guys are competing and making each other better in that wide receiver room. But one thing to close out today's episode of the show, we hear from Tim Patrick on just the subject matter for him. His journey as an undrafted rookie free agent in the NFL. He got a second-round tender. He said he was pissed he didn't get a first-round tender, but he really wants to put himself in a position where he can get a long-term contract. That's one of the goals for him. And not to mention, also achieving the Super Bowl is something that Tim Patrick wants to do in his life to really define that he's made it in the National Football League.
Try not to. It's hard not to, obviously, but I try not to, because that's every kid's dream, every guy's dream is getting that long-term contract. But at the end of the day, I gotta keep myself motivated in some way. So like now I'm at the point where I'm pissed off that I didn't get a first-round tender, and I'm pissed off that I didn't get the extension. So now I gotta go back to the drawing board and work to get that. So that's my mindset right now. I try not to think about the long-term stuff.
And his route running has improved dramatically. I mean, 0 drops last season on 79 total targets and catches. I mean, Tim Patrick had a very impressive year for the Broncos, despite the fact that there were 4 different quarterbacks that threw passes last season, dealing with Drew Lock's injury from week 2 all the way up to the New England Patriots game. Tim Patrick was the one reliable guy that I knew the Broncos could go to. Now, there was some momentum that Tim Patrick was building in that Week 17 regular season finale against the Raiders. Unfortunately, he had a little bit of a foot sprain in that first quarter. He got tackled awkwardly, and so he got to miss a little bit of that game. The remainder of the game, we got to see a little bit of Tyree Cleveland. But I tell you what, folks, Tim Patrick, he's a man on a mission. He's one of the most dedicated guys in that wide receiver room and even in the locker room. I mean, he's such a hardworking guy, attention to detail. He doesn't take breaks. He doesn't take shortcuts. He stays after, and he asks questions too, and he's always looking for ways to get better. So Tim Patrick is going to be a big key to what the Broncos want to do offensively in 2021. Very excited to see what he can do and continue to grow even further with his size and his ability as a playmaker opposite of Courtland Sutton, who makes his return. But Broncos country, that will do it for today's episode. Locked On Broncos. Thank you so much for tuning in on your favorite podcast provider, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or the Odyssey app. And not to mention, here on the YouTube channel, every single day you get video content of the Locked On Broncos podcast. And on the weekends, you get some special clips thrown in there as well. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're getting close to 4,000 subscribers. We're going to do a Patrick Surtain jersey giveaway courtesy of myself once we hit that milestone. And then once we hit 5K, we're going to do some other giveaways as well. But Broncos country, couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for your support every single day, all year long, covering the team that you root for on Sundays. I'm Cody Rourke, host of Locked On Broncos. We'll see you tomorrow for a brand new episode of the show.